I'm Professor Anna Croft. I work at the University of Exeter and the Open University. I'm a professor of education. I was a primary teacher many years ago. I still have my feet in the classroom. Research basically young people's aspirations, very interested in creativity, how children's creativity is nurtured, children from 0 to 19 and beyond. And also very interested in how young people can help to transform the kinds of educational experiences which they have. So I suppose the twin areas that I work in are creativity and educational futures, and all of that is kind of wrapped up in aspirations. Okay. From our discussion today, some of the things which popped out for me were the tension between the ways in which we can approach the world in which we live and learn and will work or do work, in terms of the values that inform how we go about our daily lives. And I suppose I was just very struck that there's a real tension between looking at the world through a view that says we need to protect young people, we need to keep them safe, we need to ensure continuity of culture, continuity of ideas, we need to make sure that they're not put at any risk, we need to make sure that firewalls are up, that mobile phones are kind of kept out, we need to make sure that there's a kind of sense of certainty about the future, a rather low trust model of approaching the world. And what was actually going on in this room, which was quite the opposite of that, which was seeing young people, the lives that we lead, as empowering, as exciting, as about novelty, as about developing culture together, about engagement, about connectivity, about being able to acknowledge the multiple identities that we are able to construct for ourselves, the connection between our avatar, the opportunities we have to exist as avatars and multiple avatars, the ways in which robots and robotics can inform our lives. It's totally different. And as an educator, I find that tension very, very interesting, because some of the ways in which schools, and I'm thinking very much about sort of formal education now, feel they have to operate is around the safety and keeping children safe and sort of there being a kind of continuity there. Whereas in fact, what we have are lots and lots of opportunities to engage with novelty, to engage with opening the walls really of the school and the classroom, to work in really quite new ways, and to acknowledge the many ways in which young people and adults engage in virtual worlds and in virtual contexts beyond the classroom. Some of the key challenges that face education at the current time are around how we think of curriculum, how we think of pedagogy, and how we think of assessment, and therefore how we nurture learning. There's a tension between a performative or standards-driven approach to provision in schools, whether it is in terms of what's learned and whether it's in terms of how that is supported, i.e. the pedagogy, or whether that's in terms of how we know that someone has learned something, i.e. through the assessment. And there's a sort of, has been over the last 20 years or so, a very strong drive towards the raising of standards, the defining of a curriculum, the assessment of individual children, individual young people, and the judging of schools and teachers by the results achieved by young people. And that's a drive in a rather individualised direction, and a rather maintaining the curriculum as if it were immovable and sort of preserved in aspic kind of direction. We've also had a move towards very much greater recognition of creativity and an encouragement of an engagement between schools and the wider cultural context, recognition that young people can produce creative cultural products and actually construct the culture in which we live, as well as engaging as members of audience with it. What can we do to continue a debate about that performative and standards-driven approach, which doesn't acknowledge the many ways in which we work collaboratively and together and generate new knowledge together in creative ways? How can we address curriculum change, change in pedagogy, and change in assessment practices for the 21st century? If we look at the ways in which social networking, gaming, different ways in which robots enter our lives and are part of our lives, we see spaces which are open, they are democratic, they're trusting. They're also dangerous because we can enter spaces where we reveal more than we perhaps then later feel we should have done. They can be ambiguous. We can choose how we present ourselves, what our identity looks like. We can pretend to be somebody else. We can alter our gender. We can pretend to be older than we are or younger than we are. Lots of interesting ethical issues that are raised by these kinds of spaces. But what happens in these spaces is something which is a collective, the building of something which is collective. One of the things that strikes me as a real opportunity in these collective spaces is to begin to look at how we can decision make together in a way that brings multiple voices into the equation, which isn't necessarily about finding closure or finding sort of unanimous agreement around issues, but which acknowledges decision making and its impact. And that's what I mean by wisdom. I think there's a real opportunity here to be looking at why we're making decisions we make, whether it's about how we play a particular game, or how we work out a glitch, or how we do a cheat in a game, or whether it is how we connect with friends within a social networking environment. We're living at a time of terrific global change. We have some real challenges facing all of us, and we have perhaps the opportunity to develop ways of operating and thinking together that might enable us to make much more responsible decisions. So one of the challenges that I think we face when we're thinking about formal and informal education, but particularly formal education in relation to trying to develop collective wisdom, is actually to acknowledge the kinds of things and the kinds of qualities of engagement that are associated with coexisting in virtual space alongside actual space. And I call those the 4 Ps of changing childhood and youth. First of all, the environments are plural. There are multiple spaces and places and time zones that we can connect with each other in. We are connected in multiple activities. There are multiple literacies going on, and the visual being increasingly important. If we think about that first P in relation to what happens in schools, I think we are quite a long way from recognising the many ways in which learning outside of the classroom in a virtual space is plural. It's plural in terms of who we're connecting with. There are vast possibilities, second P, the choices that you can make. You can make ideas turn into actions in very different ways from the ways you might do in the playground or down the street with your friends, or even in the front room face to face, and certainly very differently from the way we can do it in the classroom, and very often collectively. We're learning by doing, but we're also doing by learning. It's very, very different and very, very empowering and interesting and enabling. Third P, highly playful space. Sometimes people worry about children getting older younger. So people talk about young girls wearing clothes of young women at sort of the age of 6. They're sort of dressing as if they were 21. The idea that children can engage in online spaces and choose to be in spaces which are very open, very young. So children getting older younger, and that being an anxiety. I actually think we're getting younger older. I think we have the opportunity to play as adults throughout our entire lives in ways that we couldn't when we didn't have the kinds of virtual engagement through gaming and social networking and generating content in the past. It would be odd if I went and sat on a swing in the local playground for the afternoon and just sort of chatted among the people who were in that space. It isn't odd if I go and play in an online environment. It isn't odd if I'm social networking. It isn't odd if I'm uploading some video that I've made, or some photos that I've taken, or I'm blogging, or that's not strange. And so it's a highly playful space. So third P. And the final P, it's highly participative. All of those things involve getting stuck in there. We may physically be sitting in a space, although actually in terms of robots and robotics, we might be really quite active. But in terms of some of those other things, gaming, social networking, content generation, we might be physically sitting at a screen, whether it be in a cafe, in the kitchen, in the living room, or in the classroom. But we are hugely participating with many, many other people. There's a sort of irresistibility about that high participation. Now, those 4 Ps are, I think, quite different sorts of characteristics of childhood and youth than in comparison with the sorts of things which we're able to do in the classroom and in the school. So let's create high trust environments. Let's create environments where there's high provision. You can bring your phone in, that's absolutely fine. bring it into the classroom and use it in the classroom. Don't use it to text your friends, but use it to find stuff out. We're learning about, I don't know, somewhere in Africa, so let's Google it, let's find out about it. Take away the firewalls, make it possible for us to learn about how to be safe, learn about how to be responsible online, learn about how to have high collective intelligence online, but let's take away those controls, let's lower them and create a space where it's much more co-participative, where we recognise that there are multiple skills and capabilities in the classroom, that teachers and adults aren't the only people who know stuff. Young people do too. So let's look at how we can co-produce together.